The apartment building at 312 Westgate Avenue looked like any other on the quiet Portland street, 4 stories tall, built in the late 1970s, with a weathered brick facade and windows that reflected the pale morning light. Most people walked by without giving it a second thought. But that morning, yellow police tape fluttered against the chilly breeze, turning the ordinary building into a scene of whispered speculation. Detective Marcus Hale arrived just before 9. At 43, Marcus was a man who carried both the weight of his years on the force and the quiet burden of too many unsolved puzzles. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair at his temples and a perpetual crease between his brows. His partner, Officer Carla Jimenez, was already waiting in the narrow corridor of the second floor, tapping her pen against her notepad. "Apartment 4B, she said, motioning toward the door. Neighbors reported a smell. Super tried his master key, but the deadbolt was locked from the inside. No answer, no sound. We had to force entry." Marcus looked at the door. The brass number, 4B, hung crookedly, and faint scratches surrounded the lock. Not the marks of forced entry, just years of keys fumbling in the dark. He stepped closer, running his hand over the cool metal of the deadbolt. It was intact, sturdy. Too sturdy for anyone to force their way out unnoticed. Inside, the apartment was almost unnervingly clean. The living room opened up in a square layout, beige walls, a gray sofa against one side, a coffee table with neatly stacked magazines, and a small potted plant by the window. A laptop sat on the desk, still plugged in, its screen black but the charging light blinking softly. Everything was in its place, everything except for Evelyn Carter. She lay on the carpet, her body twisted unnaturally, as though she had simply collapsed mid-step. She was in her mid-30s, auburn hair spread like a halo around her head. Her face was pale, lips slightly parted. No overturned furniture. No broken glass. No blood. It looked peaceful, almost staged, except for the unmistakable truth: she was dead. Marcus crouched beside her. He had seen overdoses, hangings, gunshot wounds. He had seen suicides arranged neatly, and suicides that were anything but neat. But something about Evelyn's posture felt wrong. Too casual, too deliberate, as if someone had chosen how she should look. Neighbors said she lived alone, Carla said, scanning her notes. No husband, no kids. Graphic designer, worked from home. Quiet, polite. One neighbor mentioned she had a cat, but no sign of it here. Marcus' eyes swept the room. The apartment was small but warm. A faint scent of lavender hung in the air, clashing with the stronger odor of decay. In the kitchen, dishes were stacked neatly in the drying rack. A grocery receipt was pinned to the fridge. Milk, bread, coffee, dated 3 days ago. On the counter sat a half-empty glass of water, untouched for at least a day. Smell started yesterday, Carla added. Super said she hadn't been seen since Monday night. That's 4 days ago. Marcus stood, walking slowly to the windows. He checked the locks, all latched from the inside. The fire escape window was painted shut, the kind of amateur job done by a landlord trying to avoid drafts. He checked the bathroom window, same. Every exit sealed from within. He returned to the door, inspecting the bolts again. Closed tight. No tampering. No alternate escape route. Looks like suicide, Carla said quietly, echoing the words she had said earlier in the hallway. She didn't sound convinced, but the locked door was pushing her in that direction. Maybe, Marcus murmured. He had learned never to decide too early. He looked again at Evelyn's face. Her skin was too pale, her eyes too sunken. Not just death, something else. But it doesn't feel like it. By afternoon, the coroner had finished her preliminary exam. Dar. Laura Whitaker, a woman with sharp eyes behind rimless glasses, approached Marcus with her gloves still on. She spoke in the hushed, professional tone of someone who had delivered this kind of news too often. Detective Hale, she said. I can tell you this much, this isn't suicide. She was strangled. Ligature marks, faint but clear once you look closely. And she died around midnight. Marcus frowned. Midnight. And the door? Locked from the inside, Laura confirmed. Deadbolt engaged. Unless she strangled herself, which is impossible, someone killed her. But whoever it was managed to vanish and leave the apartment sealed behind them. Carla crossed her arms, her brow furrowing. So what are we saying? A ghost? Marcus didn't smile. He looked around the pristine apartment, at the silence pressing in from the walls, at the faint lavender clashing with the heavier odor of death. Not a ghost, he said quietly. Someone alive. Someone clever. And someone who thinks they've already beaten us. The case hadn't even begun, but already, Marcus felt the stirrings of obsession. He had seen crimes of passion, and he had seen calculated murders. But this was a puzzle designed to mock the very idea of solving. A woman killed in her own apartment. No forced entry. No escape. A door locked from within. It was the kind of crime that whispered in the detective's ear at night, long after the case file was closed. It was the kind of crime Marcus Hale lived for. The hallway outside apartment 4B was narrow, painted in an uninspired beige that hadn't been refreshed in decades. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, giving the space a tired, hospital-like pallor. A handful of neighbors lingered at the edges of the police tape, whispering behind cupped hands. Curiosity, fear, and the promise of gossip bound them together like moths to a flame. Detective Marcus Hale hated these moments, the way people stared, eager to offer theories before facts, eager to imagine the worst. But in cases like this, neighbors were often the first, and sometimes only, source of insight. He pulled out his notepad and exchanged a glance with Carla Jimenez. She stepped forward, her badge flashing, and addressed the gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said firmly, "we'll need to ask a few questions. Please cooperate. We'll speak to you one by one." The group shuffled uneasily. A tall man in his 50s, wearing a faded Portland Trail Blazers sweatshirt, raised his hand awkwardly. I'm George Walters. I live right across the hall. I was the one who called the super about the smell." Marcus motioned him closer. "Mr. Walters, when was the last time you saw Ms. Carter alive?" George scratched his graying beard, eyes darting nervously. "Maybe Monday evening. She came home with groceries. I heard her door shut around 7. After that, nothing. She wasn't noisy, you know. Kept to herself. Nice enough, though. Did you notice anyone visiting her apartment that night? Or in the days that followed?" Marcus asked. George shook his head quickly. "No. She didn't have many visitors. Except sometimes, well, I did hear a man's voice once or twice. Couldn't make out the words. Deep voice, though. Last time was maybe a week ago." Marcus noted it. A man's voice. That could mean a boyfriend, a client, or something else entirely. Anything unusual? Arguments? Strange noises? No, detective. Nothing like that. Just silence. Until the smell. Carla guided George back to the group and ushered forward a new figure, a middle-aged woman with sharp features and hair pulled back into a bun so tight it looked painful. She introduced herself as Mrs. Helen Marsh, resident of 4C, one door down. She was a sweet girl, Helen said briskly, clutching her cardigan around her shoulders. Always polite. But I knew something wasn't right. She looked tired lately. Pale. You could see it on her face. I told my husband more than once, that young woman is carrying something heavy. And now look. Dead. Her words had a rehearsed finality, the kind of statement people craft when they want to sound prophetic. Marcus listened carefully. Did you see her with anyone? Helen's eyes darted away. Now and then. A man, yes. Tall, dark hair. I saw him leaving once, late at night. He didn't look like he belonged here. No respect for neighbors. Didn't even say hello. Do you know his name? No. But I didn't like him. He had an edge. She folded her arms tightly, as though closing off further questions. Carla scribbled down, unknown male, tall, dark hair. Marcus kept his expression neutral, though inside, a seed of suspicion was already germinating. The next neighbor was different. Tyler Briggs, a 20-something student, still in pajama pants and a hoodie, eyes bloodshot. He leaned against the wall like the interview was interrupting his nap. Honestly, man, I didn't know her. Just saw her in the hall sometimes. She always had headphones on, didn't talk. She seemed fine. You didn't notice anything unusual this week? Marcus pressed. Tyler shrugged. I had midterms. Barely left my apartment. Sorry, dude. Not helpful. But Marcus filed it away nonetheless. Sometimes apathy was just apathy. Other times, it was a mask. They spoke with a few more residents. An elderly woman who insisted she smelled cigarette smoke from Evelyn's apartment last month, though the coroner had found no evidence of smoking, and a young mother who claimed she heard footsteps pacing late at night. Each account layered the mystery with fragments of truth and imagination. Later, with the neighbors dispersed, Marcus and Carla returned to Evelyn's apartment. The crime scene team had finished collecting evidence, fiber swabs, fingerprints, photographs of every corner. The room felt emptier now, but the echo of her presence remained. Her laptop sat on the desk, waiting. Her sketchbooks, stacked neatly on a shelf, hinted at the life she had lived when no one was watching. Carla flipped through one of the sketchbooks. She was talented, she murmured. The pages showed sleek, modern designs for logos, websites, and marketing campaigns. But interspersed among the professional work were personal drawings, faces, places, dreamlike landscapes. Some were signed with her initials. Others remained unfinished, as if she had abandoned them midway. Marcus studied the artwork. They weren't just sketches. They were windows. Evelyn had been an observer, someone who saw the world with intensity and captured it in lines and shades. Yet none of the drawings hinted at fear or foreboding. No hidden cry for help. If she had been struggling, she had buried it deeply. He opened a drawer in her desk and found a stack of mail. Bills, advertisements, a postcard from Santa Fe with no signature. One envelope stood out, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 2 words, written in black ink. I'm sorry. Marcus turned the note over, examining the handwriting. Neat, deliberate, with a flourish at the end of the Y. It didn't match Evelyn's shopping lists pinned on the fridge. Someone else had written it. But who? Carla leaned over his shoulder. Suicide note? He shook his head. No. If it were hers, it would have been left out in the open. This feels hidden. Planted. Theories swirled. Perhaps someone wanted her death to look like suicide, but the details were sloppy. Or perhaps the note was meant for Evelyn, not from her. That evening, Marcus returned to his precinct office. His desk was cluttered with old case files, coffee stains, and a dying plant he had forgotten to water. He pinned Evelyn Carter's photo to the corkboard on the wall. Next to it, he added the note, the neighbor's statements, the coroner's initial report. The board was nearly empty, but he could already see the outline of a puzzle forming. Carla sat across from him, scrolling through Evelyn's phone records. She had a few calls last week to a number that isn't saved in her contacts. Late at night. Repeated calls, lasting minutes. Same number every time. I'll have tech trace it. Good, Marcus said, eyes fixed on Evelyn's photo. And the laptop? Encrypted. We'll need digital forensics. Could take time. Marcus leaned back in his chair. His body ached, but his mind was sharper than ever. Locked room cases were rare, and they demanded perfection. One slip, one overlooked detail, and the truth would remain buried forever. He studied Evelyn's face in the photograph, a smiling, professional headshot pulled from her LinkedIn profile. She looked alive, confident, unaware of the fate waiting behind her own locked door. Who had taken that confidence from her? Who had walked into her apartment, killed her, and then somehow sealed the exit behind them? He didn't know yet. But he could feel the killer's presence like a shadow in the room, taunting him. Whoever they were, they had left traces. And Marcus Hale intended to follow every single one. At midnight, long after Carla had gone home, Marcus was still at his desk. The precinct was quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights his only companion. He poured himself another stale cup of coffee and stared at the board. The locked door. The neighbors. The note. The man with the deep voice. Pieces scattered across the table of his mind. He needed to fit them together. Outside, Portland's rain began to fall, tapping softly against the windows. Somewhere in the city, a killer walked free, confident that they had performed the perfect crime. But Marcus Hale knew one thing for certain: there was no such thing as a perfect crime. Only unsolved ones. The morning after the discovery, the city of Portland woke to gray skies and drizzle, the streets slick with early spring rain. Detective Marcus Hale arrived at Evelyn Carter's apartment once again, not for the crime scene itself, which had been processed overnight, but for the quieter, more intimate task of understanding the life that had been stolen. He entered apartment 4B with Carla, moving slowly, almost reverently. The apartment no longer smelled of decay, but the air still felt heavy with absence. Every object seemed to hum with memory. Marcus's gaze lingered on the living room once more, the potted plant, the gray sofa, the perfectly stacked magazines. A life paused mid-motion. A story interrupted. "Let's see what we can learn about her," Marcus said softly. Carla nodded, carrying a folder with the preliminary reports. Marcus began with Evelyn's laptop. Digital forensics had unlocked the files overnight, revealing a trove of personal documents, emails, and sketches. She had been a graphic designer of some renown, freelancing for local startups and occasionally consulting for a national firm. Her work was meticulous, clean, and imaginative, a reflection of her inner precision. But it was in the personal folders that Marcus found something darker. A diary, password protected but relatively easy to access given her habit of using simple codes, revealed a woman struggling quietly with life's pressures. She wrote about missed deadlines, difficult clients, and her loneliness in a city of millions. She detailed small joys, a new plant, a latte from her favorite cafe, but also a sense of being watched. March 3rd, I keep feeling eyes on me. At the office, on the street, even in my own apartment. It sounds paranoid, but the unease grows daily. Maybe it's stress. Maybe it's something worse. Marcus read the words twice, noting the subtle anxiety in her writing. Carla glanced over his shoulder, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think she was afraid of someone?" "Possibly," he murmured. Or she sensed something before she could name it. Next, they examined her contacts. A list of emails and phone numbers, most ordinary. But there were several recurring names that caught Marcus's attention: a client named Aaron Blackwood, whose emails were polite but insistent, a friend, Clara Jennings, who seemed to check in on her more than most friends would, and a mysterious contact labeled simply as D.T., appearing frequently in messages but never answered publicly. Carla raised an eyebrow. D.T.? Could be initials, could be a pseudonym. Could be nothing. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He preferred letting evidence speak, but something about those initials lingered in his mind. He shifted focus to her apartment's surroundings. The neighbors had been cooperative, but Marcus wanted first-hand observations. He knocked on doors and spoke to the residents again, this time with more directed questions. George Walters, from across the hall, remembered Evelyn leaving her apartment late Monday night, carrying a small tote bag. She was talking on the phone, sounded serious. Angry maybe. I didn't hear what she said. Just tense. Mrs. Helen Marsh had her own memory. I saw her once near the lobby, speaking to a man I didn't recognize. Dark hair, tall. He didn't look friendly. Something about him seemed off. I tried to watch discreetly, but he left before I could get a good look. Marcus wrote down details carefully, drawing a mental profile. The man with the deep voice. A possible connection to DT? Or Aaron Blackwood? He couldn't know yet. Marcus also explored Evelyn's personal routines. She had subscribed to several online design forums, attended local art workshops, and frequented the small coffee shop on 8th and Hawthorne. The barista, a young man named Ricky, remembered her fondly. She'd come in around 8 a.m., order the same thing every time, mocha with almond milk. Always alone. But she'd linger, sketching or reading emails. Never anything unusual, except once. A man came in, argued on the phone, left abruptly. She seemed shaken after that. Marcus filed the anecdote. Another shadowy male presence. His list of suspects and persons of interest was growing. Back at the apartment, Marcus turned his attention to Evelyn's social circle. Clara Jennings, her closest friend, arrived promptly after a call from the police. Clara was in her early 30s, lively and articulate, but grief had made her jittery, her hands trembling as she spoke. "Detective Hale," Clara said, voice quivering. Evelyn, she wasn't expecting this. She was careful, cautious. Always double-locked the doors, never let strangers in. She had her fears. "She didn't tell me everything." Marcus nodded. "Did she mention anyone threatening her, or someone making her uncomfortable?" Clara hesitated. She did. Once, weeks ago. A client, I think. He came to her apartment. She said she felt uneasy. She didn't go into detail. I thought she was being paranoid. Now, I wish I had pressed her. Hours passed as Marcus pieced together Evelyn's life. Her professional diligence, private anxieties, and the faint outlines of relationships hinted at someone who was cautious, yet not entirely immune to risk. Her apartment, pristine and orderly, had become a stage for a tragedy no one could have predicted. He walked again through the living room, the soft carpet under his shoes, the faint lavender lingering. He touched the note he had found, "I'm sorry." One sentence, but full of mystery. Was it a farewell? A confession? Or a warning? The evening grew darker, rain pattering softly against the window panes. Marcus stared at Evelyn's sketches, noting the careful lines, the artistic precision. She had been methodical in her life, so how had she fallen victim to someone who managed to kill her and leave the apartment locked behind them? Carla entered with a cup of coffee. "You think she knew her killer?" she asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Somewhere out there, a man, or perhaps more than one, had committed this crime. Someone who knew Evelyn, who knew her routines, her habits, and her vulnerabilities. He felt a chill, the same that had settled in him the previous day. Whoever did this had planned meticulously, left almost no trace, and walked away as if they were invisible. But Marcus Hale had a principle he carried like armor: there are no perfect crimes. Only unsolved ones. And he would solve this one. The following morning, Portland was shrouded in a dense fog that softened the edges of the city, turning the familiar streets into a blur of gray and silver. Detective Marcus Hale arrived at the precinct early, determined to chase the first solid lead in Evelyn Carter's case. Carla was already there, immersed in the digital traces Evelyn had left behind. "Marcus, you need to see this," Carla said, her eyes bright with urgency. She handed him a printed summary of phone and email records. "This number she called repeatedly last week, the mysterious DT, we traced it to a temporary burner phone. But there's a pattern. The calls always originated near downtown, in the same block, 112 3rd Avenue. It's a commercial area, offices, small shops. But it's also quiet at night." Marcus frowned. "Interesting. Someone careful enough to hide their number, but careless enough to repeat the same area. It's almost arrogant. Or confident," Carla added. They think no one can catch them. Marcus leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Let's pay that block a visit. See if anyone remembers a person appearing late at night. The building at 112 3rd Avenue was a small brick office complex, unremarkable except for a narrow alley behind it. Marcus and Carla walked the perimeter, noting the CCTV cameras mounted at entrances. Some were clearly active, others covered by dust and neglect. They entered the lobby and spoke to the building manager, a wiry man named Greg Thompson, who seemed nervous but cooperative. Yes, I remember her, or him, I mean, Greg said slowly. DT, that's what people called them. Came in a few times, always after hours. Wore a black hoodie, dark glasses, headphones. Didn't say much. Paid in cash for parking, never signed in properly. Kept to themselves. Honestly, I didn't think much of it. Just another strange visitor. Marcus made a note. You ever see them carrying anything unusual? Bags, packages? Greg paused. Sometimes a black messenger bag. Sometimes nothing. But I remember one night, rainy, like today, they left in a hurry. Slamming the door. Looked tense. I didn't see anyone else with them. That fits the timeline, Marcus murmured. We'll need to identify this DT and figure out their connection to Evelyn Carter. Back at the precinct, Marcus and Carla compiled every piece of digital information. Emails to and from DT, the timing of calls, and the recurring physical location were cross-referenced with Evelyn's sketches and diary entries. Carla highlighted one exchange. Look here. February 27th, Evelyn writes about a meeting. DT seemed impatient. Kept glancing at his watch. Something felt off. Then, February 28th, I can't ignore the warnings. I hope I'm not making a mistake. These were days before she died. Marcus studied the messages. So she met with DT at least twice. Something unsettled her. She felt threatened, or at least uneasy. Maybe, Carla said, but there's more. DT was also emailing Aaron Blackwood. Short, cryptic messages. No content, just times and dates. Whoever DT is, they're connected to Aaron too. Marcus' eyes narrowed. Aaron Blackwood, her client, had suddenly become far more interesting. The professional courtesy mask might have been hiding something darker. Marcus and Carla visited Aaron's office later that day. The building was sleek, modern, with glass doors and a polished marble lobby. Aaron Blackwood was everything the email suggested: confident, well-dressed, articulate. But as Marcus observed him, he sensed an underlying tension, the kind that comes from someone guarding a secret too carefully. Detectives, to what do I owe the pleasure? Aaron asked smoothly. His voice was calm, but Marcus detected a slight twitch near the corner of his eye. We're investigating the death of Evelyn Carter, Marcus said bluntly. We understand you had professional dealings with her. Aaron's smile didn't waver. Yes, we collaborated on a few projects. But I assure you, my connection to Ms. Carter was strictly professional. Marcus leaned in slightly. Did you know someone referred to only as DT? Any idea who that might be? Aaron's expression flickered. A micro-expression, barely perceptible. I've heard the initials, he admitted. But I don't know the person personally. Just business associates. Marcus studied him carefully. Did Evelyn ever express concern about anyone in her professional circle? Aaron's eyes shifted briefly to his assistant before returning to Marcus. Not that I'm aware of. She was careful. Very careful. Hours later, back at the precinct, Marcus and Carla pored over Aaron's known associates and past communications. DT remained elusive, but the pattern was emerging: someone professional, someone methodical, someone who understood Evelyn's routines. Then came an unexpected breakthrough. A neighbor from the building across the street from 312 Westgate Avenue called, asking to remain anonymous. She reported seeing a figure entering Evelyn's building on Monday night, someone in a black hoodie, carrying a bag. No forced entry, just a swift, practiced use of keys. Marcus' pulse quickened. This aligned perfectly with the timeline. DT, or someone acting on their behalf, had been inside her apartment that night. And whoever it was, had left the door locked behind them. He made a note to cross-check any fingerprints on the door and do a trace on the bag if possible. Whoever DT was, they weren't sloppy. They had planned the murder meticulously, leaving almost no trace, confident that no one could follow. Late that evening, Marcus returned home, exhausted but unable to sleep. He spread the photos of Evelyn's apartment across his kitchen table, along with the sketchbooks, emails, and notes from the day. The rain tapped against the window, a steady, hypnotic rhythm. He felt the presence of DT like a shadow lingering in every corner, in every line of Evelyn's sketches, in every diary entry hinting at fear. Carla called him from the precinct. "Marcus, we found something," she whispered. "CCTV from a parking garage near 3rd Avenue. We caught someone matching DT's description entering a vehicle. Plate registered to a rental company. Temporary, just like the phone. They're covering their tracks meticulously." Marcus' jaw tightened. "That's our lead. DT is careful, but even the careful make mistakes. We just have to find the gap. And when we do, we'll find Evelyn's killer." As he hung up the phone, Marcus looked back at the photos of Evelyn Carter, her auburn hair spread across the living room carpet, her lifeless eyes staring into nothing. Somewhere, a killer walked free. But Marcus Hale was no ordinary detective. He would hunt them down, step by step, until every secret was unearthed, and the locked door no longer held its mystery. The day began with a steady drizzle, the kind of Portland rain that blurred the city into a watercolor of gray and muted colors. Detective Marcus Hale stood outside a small cafe near 3rd Avenue, sipping lukewarm coffee while reviewing every scrap of information he had about DT. The burner phone, the CCTV footage, the cryptic emails, each was a piece of a puzzle that refused to assemble itself. Carla joined him, carrying a stack of printed files. "We know DT is careful," she said, lowering her voice. "Burner phone, rental car, timed calls. Whoever this person is, they plan every move. They're intelligent, methodical, almost clinical." Marcus nodded, eyes narrowing. "And yet, there's a pattern. You don't go to this much trouble unless you're hiding something bigger. A motive. Something personal." He returned to the precinct and began cross-referencing every trace of DT's existence. Emails pointed to multiple online aliases. Payments through encrypted services suggested a well-funded individual. The rental car records indicated multiple temporary addresses over the past year, mostly downtown Portland, sometimes in Beaverton, occasionally even out of state. Carla glanced at him. "This isn't just a freelance hacker or a casual criminal. Whoever DT is, they're organized. And they've been planning something, maybe longer than we thought." Marcus rubbed his temples, thinking aloud. "Let's go back to the apartment. I need to walk through Evelyn's life again. Maybe there's something we overlooked, something that points to why DT would kill her." Apartment 4B felt colder than before, the walls seeming to whisper secrets. Marcus examined the drawings on her desk again, noticing small, almost imperceptible annotations in the margins. Coordinates, times, small symbols he didn't recognize. At first glance, they looked like random doodles, but to someone trained in observation, patterns emerged. "Do you see this?" Marcus pointed to a page showing a city map with tiny marks near downtown office buildings. "These aren't just doodles. Evelyn was tracking something. Or someone. And I have a feeling it was DT." Carla leaned in. "You think she was aware of them?" "I think she feared them," Marcus said quietly. "Look at the annotations, dates, times, locations. She was meticulous. She knew she was in danger." The investigation into Aaron Blackwood's connections became more pressing. Marcus learned that Aaron had recently been involved in a dispute over intellectual property, a lawsuit pending against a rival firm. Evelyn had worked on some of Aaron's sensitive projects. Could DT be linked to this dispute? Or was the motive more personal, aimed directly at Evelyn? A breakthrough came when Marcus received a call from the city's IT liaison. "Detective, we've traced some of the emails DT sent," the voice said. "They were routed through multiple VPNs, but one login pattern repeats. Every Friday around midnight, DT connects from a small cafe near 8th Street. Not a single alias, just a direct connection. If you stake it out, you might get a real face." Marcus' eyes lit up. "Good. Carla, grab your coat. We're going hunting." They arrived at the cafe late Friday night. The establishment was nearly empty, except for a barista wiping down tables and a lone figure seated by the window. The person wore a black hoodie, glasses reflecting the dim light, fingers flying across a laptop keyboard. The rhythm of typing was precise, deliberate, almost mechanical. "Could be them," Carla whispered. Marcus watched quietly, taking note of every movement. The figure packed up after about 30 minutes, leaving the laptop behind briefly to grab a coffee. Marcus recognized the careful timing from the CCTV footage. DT had a pattern, predictable in its own way, though masked by meticulous planning. They followed at a distance as the figure exited, stepping into the foggy streets. Marcus' mind raced with possibilities. Who was DT? A disgruntled client? A professional rival? Or someone with a personal vendetta? Back at the precinct, forensic analysis began to connect dots. Fingerprints from the apartment door matched partial prints found on a discarded glove near the alleyway behind Evelyn's building, DT's fingerprints. Marcus compared handwriting from the "I'm sorry" note with known samples from Aaron Blackwood's correspondence. No match. The note was likely written by DT. "Detective," Carla said, "look at this. Evelyn sketches, these symbols, these coordinates, they line up with locations where DT has been observed entering or leaving. She was mapping them, tracking them. She knew the danger was close." Marcus stared at the map. Each mark seemed to pulse with foreboding. "She was brave," he murmured. "Or desperate." They turned attention to possible motives. Marcus considered several scenarios. 1. Professional sabotage. Evelyn had sensitive information about Aaron Blackwood's projects. DT could be a corporate spy, sent to eliminate her as a risk. 2. Personal vendetta. DT knew Evelyn personally, maybe a rejected suitor, an obsessed client, or someone from her past seeking revenge. 3. Cover-up. Evelyn might have witnessed something illegal, embezzlement, blackmail, or a threat that required silence. DT's actions were calculated to prevent exposure. Each theory held weight, but none could yet be confirmed. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, waiting to be assembled. Marcus spent hours studying the patterns of DT's movements, cross-referencing every location, every interaction. One fact became increasingly clear: DT was organized, meticulous, and patient. They didn't act recklessly. The murder had been planned, calculated to the smallest detail, timed with Evelyn's own schedule, executed with precision, and the exit secured to create the illusion of a sealed room. Carla pointed out something subtle but critical. "Detective, look at the timing. All DT's observed appearances align with Evelyn's diary entries about feeling watched, about late-night calls and meetings. This isn't random. DT was closing in over time, monitoring her every move, and she knew it. She left clues in her sketches, hoping someone would see." Marcus exhaled slowly. She was a strategist in her own right, but she underestimated the audacity of DT. Or perhaps she knew it would come to this, and she left trails hoping we'd follow. That night, Marcus returned home once more, the weight of the investigation pressing on his shoulders. He pored over the images, the maps, the diagrams Evelyn had left behind. Every detail mattered. Every missed symbol could mean another lead lost forever. He thought of DT, a figure lurking in the shadows, methodical, patient, almost ghost-like. The kind of person who could enter an apartment, commit murder, and vanish behind a locked door without leaving a single trace. Yet Marcus knew this: even the most careful predator made mistakes. Even the most meticulous plan had a weak point. And he would find it. As the rain drummed steadily against the windowpane, Marcus Hale made a silent vow. He would track DT, uncover their identity, and bring justice to Evelyn Carter. Every puzzle had a solution, and he would not rest until he had found it. Because some doors, no matter how locked, could always be opened, with enough patience, enough attention, and enough courage. Portland streets were cloaked in a thick fog that evening, the kind that made the familiar feel alien, and the city's usual hum of traffic and distant sirens muted, replaced by the whispering of rain against the asphalt. Detective Marcus Hale and Carla parked their unmarked sedan 2 blocks from the cafe where DT had been observed previously. Tonight, they intended to follow, not confront. Carla adjusted the binoculars, her breath visible in the cold night air. "They're predictable," she whispered. "Every Friday at midnight, same cafe, same pattern. We just need to stay patient." Marcus nodded, scanning the fog-shrouded streets. "We follow, we observe, no sudden moves. If we spook them, they vanish like a ghost." At exactly 11:58 p.m., a figure emerged from the cafe. Black hoodie, dark glasses, hands stuffed into the pockets of a sleek leather bag slung across the shoulder. The rain-soaked sidewalk reflected the dim streetlights, creating twin shadows that danced like phantoms. "DT," Marcus whispered. They followed at a discreet distance, keeping to alleys and side streets. The figure moved confidently, almost arrogantly, as if the city itself yielded to their presence. The target entered a narrow building marked as a storage and office complex, doors opening silently with a keycard. Marcus made a mental note: the keycard access would be crucial later. The movements were deliberate, rehearsed, habitual. "See how calm they are," Carla murmured. "No hesitation. This is someone used to being watched, used to moving without notice." Inside the building, the faint glow of a laptop screen illuminated the interior. DT settled at a desk in a small, private office. Their movements were precise, almost mechanical, typing, highlighting documents, comparing spreadsheets. It became clear that DT was not just a shadowy presence. They were meticulous, calculating, professional. Carla whispered, "We're watching someone very methodical. This isn't a crime of passion. This is professional." Marcus agreed silently. He took photographs, noted the time, and mapped the office layout. If this was where DT planned their moves, then the location itself was a goldmine of potential evidence. Hours passed as DT continued their work. Every few minutes, they glanced at a mobile device, checking messages, scanning maps, occasionally jotting notes. Marcus recognized patterns similar to those found in Evelyn's sketches: coordinates, times, locations marked carefully. Evelyn had tracked DT for a reason, and now it was clear why. DT was always monitoring, always calculating. At 1:12 a.m., DT left the office briefly, carrying a black messenger bag. They moved down the alley, pausing to speak quietly on the phone, voice low but urgent. Marcus strained to hear, catching only fragments. "Don't let them see, midnight. Tomorrow." "That's our first glimpse of the network," Marcus murmured. "They're coordinating, not acting alone. Someone else might be involved." They followed DT as they walked to a nearby parking garage. Marcus noted the rental car, plates matching previous records. DT entered the vehicle, glanced around, then drove off slowly, careful not to attract attention. "Where to?" Carla asked. Marcus shook his head. "We follow. We learn." The sedan wove through the city, DT taking winding streets, avoiding main roads. Marcus realized they were heading somewhere specific, likely a safe house or secondary location tied to their past. Hours later, DT arrived at an old warehouse near the riverfront, nondescript and shuttered. The black SUV parked, and the figure disappeared inside. Marcus and Carla retreated to a shadowed distance, documenting every detail. The next day, forensic and investigative work began. Marcus and Carla sifted through city records, social media, and public documents, trying to unearth anything about DT's identity. Slowly, a pattern emerged. DT was known by multiple aliases, each connected to financial and digital activity. Online records revealed a history of corporate espionage, identity theft, and illegal surveillance. There were reports of mysterious disappearances of digital data, unexplained breaches in small design firms, and strange incidents in cities where DT had lived. Carla commented, "This person isn't just a killer. They're a manipulator, a planner, a strategist. They've done this before." Evelyn wasn't random. Marcus exhaled. She wasn't just a victim of chance. She was the target. Meanwhile, Marcus traced a lead to an abandoned apartment once rented under one of DT's aliases. Inside, dust-covered desks and filing cabinets, but the digital footprints were intact. Hard drives, encrypted files, and a tangle of cords and devices revealed the scope of DT's operations. Lists of names and addresses, including Evelyn's. Detailed notes on schedules, routines, and habits of targets. Financial transactions, showing funding from unknown sources. Every detail confirmed the same unsettling truth: DT had studied Evelyn, mapped her routines, predicted her movements, and executed the murder with precision. Marcus and Carla compiled profiles, connecting the dots between DT's past, their surveillance techniques, and Evelyn's final days. Patterns emerged: obsession with control, manipulation of victims, meticulous planning. Marcus realized DT wasn't just a criminal, they were a predator who enjoyed the intellectual challenge of a perfect crime. Carla spoke quietly, "Do you think they knew we'd be watching eventually?" Marcus considered. Maybe. Or maybe they never expect anyone to watch. They move in the shadows, but even shadows leave traces. That night, Marcus returned to Evelyn's apartment one last time before preparing for surveillance. He walked through her living room, tracing the edges of the carpet, the furniture, the notes she had left behind. Her sketches, her diary, even the smallest details, they were all pieces of a puzzle DT had underestimated. He picked up a pencil she had used, examining the pressure marks on the paper. Evelyn had tried to communicate, to leave evidence, to make sure that if something happened, someone could follow the trail. She had been smart, resourceful, and vigilant, but DT had been one step ahead. Marcus felt a chill as he stared at her empty apartment, the rain still pattering softly against the windows. "We'll find you," he whispered. "And when we do, this ends. Because even the most careful predator leaves a shadow, and shadows can be tracked." And Marcus Hale intended to follow every trace until DT's mask was torn away, revealing the person behind the meticulous, chilling facade. The rain refused to stop that week, turning Portland into a city of blurred lights and endless gray. Detective Marcus Hale sat at his desk long after midnight, the soft glow of his desk lamp illuminating stacks of files and Evelyn Carter's sketches. He was close, closer than he had ever been. The threads were aligning, weaving a portrait of the phantom known only as DT. Carla entered with 2 steaming cups of coffee, her hair damp from the mist outside. She placed one in front of him and leaned against the desk. "We got the final results back from the encrypted drives we found in the abandoned apartment," she said. "Took the tech team 72 hours, but they cracked it." Marcus straightened. "And?" Carla slid a thin folder across the desk. Inside was a name that seemed almost anticlimactic in its ordinariness. Daniel Troy, ***. Born in Seattle. Age 36. Former intelligence consultant turned private contractor. Specialized in digital surveillance, infiltration, and covert operations. No criminal record, but a history riddled with sealed contracts and confidential work for private corporations and government agencies. Marcus whispered the name. Daniel Troy. DT. The deeper they read, the darker the story became. Daniel had once been a rising star in the intelligence field, praised for his ingenuity and precision. But he had been dismissed quietly after a classified mission went wrong overseas, details redacted. Afterward, he drifted into the shadows, offering his skills to the highest bidder. Corporate espionage, private vendettas, data theft. Daniel became a ghost who traded in secrets. Carla shook her head. He was invisible by design. No wonder it's been so hard to pin him down. Marcus studied Evelyn's sketches again. Among them was one figure repeated across several pages, a man in a hood, glasses, always turned slightly away from her perspective. She had seen him. She had known him. She recognized him, Marcus said softly. She was sketching the shadow she couldn't name. The next morning, Marcus and Carla met with Evelyn's friend, Jessica Miller, hoping to dig deeper into her personal life. Jessica was still shaken, her voice trembling as she spoke. Evelyn confided in me about someone she thought was following her, Jessica admitted. She didn't give me a name, but she described him. Tall, dark hair, always wearing a hood. She said he had this intensity. Like he was watching everything. She thought she was being paranoid at first, but then she got scared. Marcus exchanged a look with Carla. Evelyn had seen Daniel Troy, and she had been right to be afraid. Did she ever say why he might be interested in her? Marcus asked. Jessica hesitated, biting her lip. She said it was connected to Aaron Blackwood. Something about a contract dispute, sensitive designs. She told me if anything happened to her, should tell the police to look at Blackwood's clients. Marcus' jaw tightened. Blackwood again. The name kept resurfacing like a bad omen. Later that day, Marcus tracked down financial records connecting Blackwood's firm to Daniel Troy. A shell corporation had funneled payments to Troy's accounts, large sums of money labeled as consulting fees. It was all too neat, too clean. Carla cursed under her breath. So Blackwood hired him. That explains the connection. Marcus wasn't satisfied. But why Evelyn? Why kill her instead of just stealing designs? The answer came in Evelyn's diary. Buried in the entries from the last month, they found the truth. February 15th, Aaron asked me to sign a contract I wasn't comfortable with. He wants me to hand over full rights to my latest project. I said no. He wasn't happy, asterisk. February 20th, I think someone is watching me. Could it be connected to Aaron, asterisk. February 23rd, I met with DT today. He tried to intimidate me, said Aaron just wanted cooperation. But I don't trust them, asterisk. February 28th. I'm scared. If something happens to me, it won't be by choice, asterisk. Marcus closed the book slowly, the words settling like lead in his chest. Evelyn hadn't just been a random target, she had been pressured, manipulated, and finally silenced because she refused to yield. That night, Marcus and Carla set up surveillance outside the warehouse by the riverfront. At 2 a.m., Daniel Troy arrived, carrying his ever-present messenger bag. They watched him enter, lights flickering briefly inside. Carla whispered, "He looks so ordinary." Marcus nodded. That's his power. Ordinary enough to vanish in a crowd, skilled enough to leave no trace. But he made a mistake, he underestimated Evelyn. And now he's underestimated us. They documented every movement, every interaction. At one point, Daniel took out a file folder, flipping through documents under the dim glow of a desk lamp. Marcus caught a glimpse through the binoculars, Evelyn's name was on the cover. Proof. 2 days later, they obtained a warrant to raid the warehouse. Inside, they uncovered a chilling archive. Folders labeled with names, including Evelyn's. Surveillance photos of her walking to work, shopping, sitting by her apartment window. Detailed timelines of her daily routines. A blueprint of her apartment, annotated with possible entry and exit points. Carla stared at the evidence in horror. He studied her like she was a project. Every movement, every habit. This wasn't just a job for him. He was obsessed. Marcus' fists clenched. This wasn't about money anymore. This was personal. Back at the precinct, they pieced together Daniel's motive. Evelyn had refused to sign over her designs, standing in the way of Blackwood's deal. Daniel had been hired to pressure her, but his obsession grew. For a man who thrived on control, Evelyn's defiance became an intolerable insult. She wasn't just a client's problem, she was a challenge. And Daniel Troy never left a challenge unresolved. Carla's voice was quiet. He killed her because she said no. Because she refused to be controlled. Marcus nodded grimly. And because he believed he could get away with it. Yet something still gnawed at Marcus. The pieces fit, Blackwood's money, Daniel's methods, Evelyn's resistance, but there was a gap. A shadow behind the shadow. Why would someone as meticulous as Daniel leave just enough evidence to be found? Why risk drawing attention by meeting Evelyn face to face, when intimidation could have been done anonymously? Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the case board. A thought whispered at the edges of his mind, too faint to form but impossible to ignore. What if Daniel Troy wasn't working alone? That night, Marcus dreamed of Evelyn's apartment. He saw her sitting by the window, sketching shadows she couldn't name, her face tense with fear. He heard the creak of her floorboards, the turning of a lock, the silence before the storm. And then he saw a second shadow. Not Daniel Troy. Someone else. Watching from behind. Marcus woke with a start, sweat dripping down his forehead. He knew what the case was telling him now. Daniel Troy was the executioner. But there was another hand pulling the strings. The game wasn't over. It was only beginning. The night was bitterly cold, the kind of chill that seemed to seep into Marcus Hale's bones no matter how tightly he wrapped his coat around himself. The city had gone quiet, except for the low hum of traffic on distant streets and the occasional wail of a siren. Marcus and Carla sat in their unmarked car outside the derelict warehouse on Riverfront Avenue, their eyes fixed on the entrance. They had been watching for hours. Daniel Troy had returned twice this week, always under cover of darkness, always carrying his worn messenger bag. Tonight felt different. Tonight, Marcus sensed, was the night they had to move. Carla tapped her fingers nervously against the dashboard. "Warrants thin," she murmured. "We've got circumstantial evidence, surveillance logs, but nothing solid enough for a conviction. If this goes sideways..." "It won't," Marcus interrupted, though his tone was more determined than certain. He rubbed his jaw, feeling the weight of sleepless nights. "We can't wait any longer. If we let him keep moving, Evelyn won't be the last." As if on cue, the warehouse door creaked open. Daniel Troy stepped out into the night. His hood was drawn up, but even from a distance Marcus could see the calculated sharpness in his movements, measured, deliberate, like a man who knew the world was a chessboard and he was always 10 moves ahead. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. There he is. They moved in silence, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the wet pavement. The plan was simple: intercept Troy before he reached his car. Carla circled wide, cutting off the alley. Marcus approached from the front, his hand hovering near his holster. "Troy." Marcus called out, his voice steady but commanding. Daniel froze. He didn't turn immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if considering whether to acknowledge the voice at all. Finally, he turned, his hood falling back just enough to reveal sharp cheekbones, cold eyes, and the faintest hint of a smile. "Detective Hale," Daniel said softly, as though greeting an old acquaintance. "You've been busy." Marcus stepped closer, careful but firm. "Hands where I can see them." Daniel raised his hands slowly, palms open. But the smirk never left his face. "And here I thought we'd exchange pleasantries first. You've come a long way to find me." Carla emerged from the shadows behind him, weapon drawn. "Don't move, Troy." For a moment, the three stood in a tense triangle of silence, the city holding its breath. "You killed Evelyn Carter," Marcus said. His words weren't a question. Daniel's smile thinned, but his eyes never wavered. "Killed?" He tilted his head, studying Marcus like an insect under glass. "That's a blunt word, detective. People die for all sorts of reasons. Misfortune. Miscalculation. Refusal. She refused you, Marcus shot back. She wouldn't sell out her designs, wouldn't bend. So you strangled her. Daniel's lips curved into something between amusement and disdain. Strangling is such a crude act, don't you think? But yes, Evelyn. Evelyn was stubborn. I admire stubbornness in a way. It makes people interesting. But it also makes them vulnerable. Carla's voice was sharp. You're confessing. Confessing? Daniel chuckled, low and cold. No, Officer Jimenez. I'm reminding you that I am not the villain of your story. I'm simply the inevitable conclusion of choices people make. Marcus took another step forward. He could see Daniel's pulse at his neck, steady, unervingly calm. You're coming with us. Daniel's gaze flicked between them, calculating distances, exits, possibilities. Do you really believe this ends here, detective? That you've cornered me? Don't test me, Marcus growled. But Daniel did. In a single, fluid motion, he dropped to one knee, swept his messenger bag open, and tossed a flashbang grenade onto the wet pavement. Down! Carla shouted, covering her face. The explosion ripped through the alley with a burst of white light and deafening sound. Marcus' ears rang, vision blurred. By the time he blinked through the haze, Daniel was already moving, fast, efficient, darting toward the fire escape ladder. Marcus gave chase, lungs burning as his boots pounded against the metal steps. Carla followed close behind, gun drawn, shouting for Troy to stop. But Daniel didn't stop. He scaled the ladder with the agility of a man who had done it 1,000 times. At the rooftop, he paused just long enough to glance down at Marcus, his silhouette framed against the sickly glow of the city lights. You're too late, he called down, voice steady despite the chase. You don't understand. Evelyn was just the beginning. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness beyond the roofline. Marcus and Carla scoured the rooftops for an hour, but Troy had vanished as though swallowed by the night itself. By the time they regrouped at the car, frustration and adrenaline weighed heavy in the air. Carla slammed her fist against the hood. Damn it! We had him. We had him right there. Marcus leaned against the car, chest heaving, sweat mixing with rain. He wanted this, he said quietly. He wanted us to see him. To hear him. He's not just running, he's sending a message. Carla turned to him, eyes sharp. What message? Marcus looked out at the skyline, the rain painting the city in streaks of gray and silver. That he's not working alone. Evelyn wasn't his only job. There's something bigger. And we're only scratching the surface. The precinct felt colder than usual when they returned. Marcus pinned photos of Daniel Troy onto the caseboard, circling connections with thick red ink. Evelyn Carter. Aaron Blackwood. Shell Corporations. Surveillance notes. The threads tangled together, but the center remained elusive. Carla sat on the edge of the desk, her exhaustion hidden beneath a layer of determination. You saw his eyes, Marcus. He wasn't just talking about Evelyn. He's got other names, other targets. Marcus nodded grimly. And he enjoys the hunt. That's the part that scares me. They fell into silence, the weight of failure pressing heavy between them. They had confronted the ghost and found him all too human, yet just as untouchable. At 3 a.m., Marcus sat alone in his office, staring at Evelyn's sketches one more time. Her drawings of a hooded figure haunted him now more than ever. She had captured Daniel's presence long before she knew his name. But in the margins of one sketch, Marcus noticed something he hadn't before, another figure, half erased, barely outlined, as though Evelyn had started to draw but lost the courage to finish. A second shadow. His breath caught. She hadn't just seen Daniel Troy. She had seen someone else with him. The memory of Troy's parting words echoed in Marcus' mind. Evelyn was just the beginning. And suddenly, Marcus knew the truth. Daniel Troy wasn't just a killer. He was a messenger. A weapon in the hands of someone even more dangerous. The storm was only beginning. The following morning, the precinct felt like a graveyard. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, papers shuffled in tired hands, and the air carried the heavy silence of unanswered questions. Marcus Hale stood at the case board, staring at Daniel Troy's photo. His expression was calm on the surface, but his jaw was tight, his eyes narrowed. "We're chasing a ghost," Carla muttered, tossing a stack of surveillance logs onto the desk. "We've got his face, his moves, his tricks. But what we don't have? Motive. Why Evelyn? Why now?" Marcus tapped the board with his pen. "That's the wrong question. Troy's not the why. He's the how." Someone pointed him at Evelyn, and he pulled the trigger, figuratively. "We find the person behind him, we find the motive." Carla folded her arms. "You think it's Blackwood?" Marcus's eyes flicked to the photo of Aaron Blackwood pinned to the board. The late tech mogul smiled stiffly from the glossy magazine clipping, forever frozen as the visionary CEO of Blackwood Industries. "Blackwood's dead," Marcus said. But dead men still cast long shadows. Evelyn was working on designs, encrypted prototypes. Whoever commissioned Troy wanted them silenced. Carla frowned. "So what, some tech conspiracy? A boardroom hit job?" Marcus shook his head. "Bigger. They started with the paper trail." Carla combed through financials, tracing wire transfers through shell corporations with names so generic they might as well have been jokes: Blue Horizons LLC, Evergreen Holdings, Prime Solutions, but hidden beneath the corporate camouflage was a pattern. "Here," she said, spinning her laptop toward Marcus. "Each transfer funnels into a holding company in Delaware. Then from there, straight into a consulting firm in DC called Helio Strategies. Guess who shows up on their client list?" Marcus leaned over her shoulder. His eyes narrowed as he read the name. "Blackwood Industries," he murmured. Even after Blackwood's death, the company's still moving money through these channels. And Helio Strategies? They're not just consultants. They're spooks. Ex-intelligence, ex-military, government contracts buried under red tape. Marcus exhaled slowly. Troy's not just a killer. He's an asset. By midday, they arranged a meeting with an informant, Derek Lawson, a former Blackwood security contractor. He had agreed reluctantly, only after Carla promised anonymity. They met in the back booth of a dingy diner on the outskirts of town, where the smell of fried onions clung to the walls and the blinds never quite shut out the light. Derek was in his late 30s, wiry, with dark circles under his eyes. His hands shook slightly as he wrapped them around his coffee mug. "You don't know what you're asking," Derek said, voice low. "You think Troy's dangerous? He's a drop in the ocean. The people he works for, they don't leave trails, and they don't forgive mistakes." Marcus leaned forward. "We don't want the ocean. We want the tide pulling it. Who hired him? Who wanted Evelyn Carter dead?" Derek's eyes darted around the diner, scanning faces, windows, exits. "You don't understand. Evelyn wasn't random. She stumbled onto something she shouldn't have. Blackwood's death left a vacuum, and the vultures moved in. She got a glimpse of the blueprint." "What blueprint?" Carla pressed. Derek swallowed hard. "Helio Strategies. They've been buying patents, cornering designs in AI, surveillance tech, biotech. Evelyn's work, her designs, they were part of it. But she refused to sell. That's why she had to go." Marcus's voice was steady, but his pulse quickened. "Who gave the order?" Derek hesitated, his face pale. He glanced down at his coffee, then whispered a name. "Richard Kessler." The name meant nothing at first. But as soon as they returned to the precinct, Marcus pulled the file. Richard Kessler, former political advisor, current CEO of Helio Strategies. Wealthy, connected, untouchable. He had been photographed at charity galas with senators, shaking hands with defense contractors, smiling beside presidents. The kind of man whose suit cost more than Marcus's monthly salary. Carla whistled under her breath. This guy's on magazine covers. You're telling me he ordered a hit on a graphic designer? Marcus stared at Kessler's photo. The man's smile was warm, polished, but his eyes held a glint that Marcus recognized. Ruthlessness disguised as charm. Evelyn wasn't just a designer. She had something he wanted. And when charm didn't work, Marcus pointed at Daniel Troy's photo. He sent him. The realization hung heavy in the room. Evelyn Carter had died not because of who she was, but because of what she represented: independence, refusal, resistance. And Daniel Troy had been the instrument of her silencing. But now they had a new target. Not just a phantom killer in the night, but the man pulling the strings from the highest levels of power. Carla broke the silence. We go after Kessler, we'd better be ready for a war. He's not some lone wolf we can corner in an alley. He's got lawyers, politicians, private armies. Marcus's jaw tightened. He thought of Evelyn's lifeless body on the carpet, of the lavender scent clashing with the stench of death. He thought of her sketches, of the shadow beside Troy that had haunted him since. Then we start a war, he said. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat in his darkened apartment, staring at Kessler's photo on his laptop screen. The smile mocked him, the polished veneer of a man who thought himself untouchable. But in the shadows, Marcus also saw Daniel Troy's face. Not gloating this time, but waiting, like a predator crouched in the tall grass. And Marcus knew the truth: Daniel Troy was dangerous, yes. But the real enemy had just revealed himself. Richard Kessler. The man behind the curtain. The morning after Derek Lawson whispered Richard Kessler's name, the precinct felt different. Not just tense, compromised, Detective Marcus Hale noticed it the moment he stepped through the glass doors. The chatter among uniforms was subdued, the air thick with caution. Carla met him near the elevators, her expression tight. You feel it too? She asked. Marcus nodded. Someone's been talking. We stirred the hornet's nest. Inside Captain Morales's office, the hornets had a face. Morales stood with his arms crossed, a folder in his hand, jaw clenched. Sit down, he ordered. Marcus and Carla exchanged a glance before obeying. Morales dropped the folder onto the desk. It was stamped with the city attorney's seal. I just got a call from upstairs. This case, Evelyn Carter, Daniel Troy, all of it, it's being pulled out of our hands. Effective immediately. Carla's fists clenched. What? On whose authority? Morales's eyes flicked to Marcus, then back down at the file. Richard Kessler. He's got friends in the mayor's office, the governor's office, hell, maybe even D.C. The official line is that this case involves national security interests. Marcus felt the heat rising in his chest. National security, my ass. This is Kessler flexing muscle. He doesn't want us digging any deeper. Morales lowered his voice. You're right. And I'm telling you this off the record: you push further, you'll be finished. Not suspended, finished. Badge gone, pension gone. And maybe worse. They left the office in silence. The hum of the precinct felt louder, each voice sharper. Marcus could sense eyes on them, watching, measuring. Carla finally spoke as they stepped outside into the gray Portland drizzle. So that's it? We just roll over? Let Kessler bury her? Marcus shook his head. Not a chance. But we have to be smart. We keep digging, but off the books. No case files, no paper trail. If Kessler's got eyes in the department, we make ourselves invisible. Carla's lips curved into a humorless smile. Working without a net. Great. That evening, the first shot was fired. Derek Lawson, their reluctant informant, was found dead in his car on the edge of the Willamette River. Official report: suicide. Gun in hand, single shot to the head. But Marcus knew better. When he arrived at the scene, uniformed officers kept their distance, whispering. Carla pulled him aside, her voice trembling with fury. He was supposed to be under watch. I checked the rotation myself. Someone pulled his protection 2 hours ago. Marcus's stomach twisted. Orders from above. She nodded grimly. Kessler's cleaning house. That night, Marcus sat alone in his apartment, staring at the city lights through the rain-streaked window. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. A smooth, controlled voice came through the line. Detective Hale. Marcus froze. He recognized the cadence instantly, the polished confidence of someone who had never once been told no. Richard Kessler, Marcus said. The man chuckled softly. I see my reputation precedes me. You've been very busy. Digging where you shouldn't. Asking the wrong people the wrong questions. Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. Evelyn Carter. Why did you have her killed? A pause. Then Kessler's voice, calm and cold. Detective, I don't kill people. I create futures. Evelyn refused to be part of one. That's all you need to know. Marcus's jaw clenched. And Daniel Troy? He's your executioner? Another pause. Daniel Troy is efficient. But don't waste your time chasing him. You should be more concerned about yourself. And your partner. Marcus's pulse spiked. Is that a threat? Kessler's chuckle returned, silk over steel. A warning. Walk away, Hale. Or you'll end up like Lawson. The city doesn't need another tragedy on its hands. The line went dead. When Carla arrived at Marcus's apartment an hour later, dripping from the rain, he was still gripping the phone like it might bite him. He called me, Marcus said quietly. Carla stiffened. Kessler? Marcus nodded. He knows everything. About us, about Lawson. He practically admitted it. But the way he said it. Carla dropped her wet coat onto the chair, eyes blazing. He's daring us to stop. He thinks we'll back off. Marcus stared out at the city again, neon bleeding into rain-soaked streets. His voice was steady, low. No. He thinks we'll break. But he's wrong. That night, as Portland slept, two forces moved quietly in the dark. Marcus and Carla, now fugitives from their own chain of command, preparing to fight a war in the shadows. And Richard Kessler, smiling in his glass tower, pulling strings to make sure they wouldn't survive it. The pressure above had begun. And the city itself was about to become a battlefield. The next 48 hours blurred into constant motion, back alleys, unmarked diners, half-lit motel rooms with curtains always drawn. Marcus and Carla had become ghosts in their own city. The precinct was no longer safe. Phones couldn't be trusted. Every text, every call, every piece of digital evidence could already be in Kessler's hands. So they moved by instinct and paranoia, carrying only what they could write down in notebooks that never left their sight. It was exhausting. But it was working. Until the night it all fell apart. Carla had insisted on driving home alone. If we keep moving everywhere together, we'll stand out more, she argued. Marcus didn't like it, but she wasn't wrong. She pulled her car into the lower deck of the Morrison Street Bridge parking structure, the rain falling in sheets. Headlights swept across concrete pillars, briefly illuminating her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were tired, shadowed, but determined. She killed the engine. The rain hammered louder. For a moment, she just sat there, listening. Then she saw it. In the mirror, a shadow shifted in the back seat. Carla's hand darted toward her sidearm, too late. A wire loop snaked around her throat, yanked tight. She gagged, clawing at the steel cord cutting into her skin. Easy, a voice whispered in her ear, calm, precise. Daniel Troy. She slammed her elbow back, connecting with ribs. The wire slackened for a heartbeat, just enough. She twisted sideways, dragging her gun from the holster. A shot roared inside the car, deafening. The window spiderwebbed, shards scattering. Troy cursed, the wire dropping away. Carla threw open the driver's side door, rolling out onto the wet pavement, gasping for air. She scrambled to her feet, firing another shot. Sparks burst from the concrete pillar inches from Troy's head as he lunged from the car. His silhouette melted into the shadows of the garage, fast, predatory. Carla. Marcus's voice. He had ignored her protest, trailing her at a distance. Now he sprinted across the slick concrete, gun drawn. Together they swept the garage, ears ringing from the echoes of gunfire, but Troy was gone. A ghost again. Minutes later, police cruisers flooded the structure, lights flashing red and blue. But instead of relief, Marcus and Carla felt the weight of something else, suspicion. Uniformed officers lingered, whispering, throwing glances their way. One sergeant muttered loud enough for Marcus to hear, "Convenient how they're always in the middle of gunfire nobody else sees." Carla sat on the curb, neck red and raw, refusing medical treatment. Marcus crouched beside her, voice low. "He wanted to kill you, but he didn't finish the job." Carla shook her head. "No. He wanted to send a message." Marcus frowned. "What message?" Carla's voice was hoarse but steady. "That we're vulnerable. That Kessler can reach us anywhere. And that next time, it won't be a warning." The official report filed the incident as an altercation with an unidentified assailant. But within 12 hours, rumors spread through the precinct. Some said Carla staged the attack. Others whispered Marcus fired the shots himself to cover a mistake. The rot was spreading. At dawn, Marcus received another anonymous call. This time, no voice, just silence. Then a text message appeared on his phone. "You can't protect her, ****. He showed it to Carla. She looked at him with tired eyes, then tucked the phone back into his pocket. "Then we stopped waiting for him to come to us," she said. "It's time we go after Kessler." Hard. Marcus nodded. The decision was no longer theirs. Kessler had drawn first blood. That night, Marcus pinned Evelyn Carter's photo to the motel wall beside the blurry surveillance shots of Daniel Troy and the newspaper clippings of Richard Kessler smiling at charity galas. Rain beat against the window, neon flickered in the glass. He stared at the faces. Evelyn. Daniel. Kessler. Carla's bruised throat. One thought pulsed louder than the rain. No more defense. War, ****. Rain had become a constant companion, washing Portland in gray. Marcus Hale watched the drop streak across the motel window as Carla spread documents across the bed, bank statements, shell company records, charity invoices that smelled too clean. "Everything he does runs through fronts," Carla muttered, stabbing a finger at the papers. "Offshore accounts, dummy corporations. But look here." She slid a photocopy toward Marcus. A list of board members from a Kessler Youth Outreach Foundation. 3 names circled in red. "All dead," Carla said. "Car accidents, heart attacks, natural causes." But the timing? Each one just weeks after moving large sums of money into Kessler's companies. He launders through people, then erases them. Marcus leaned back, rubbing his temples. "So we prove it. We find the money trail, we get him on federal fraud charges. Forget murder, we bury him in paper." Carla shook her head. "Not without help. And right now? Every door we knock on is one more leak straight back to Kessler." Their problem became clear the next morning. Marcus arrived at the precinct in plain clothes, avoiding eyes, but he was stopped at the security desk. "Sorry, detective," the guard said stiffly, avoiding his gaze. "Your badge has been flagged. Restricted access." Before Marcus could respond, internal affairs officers appeared, flanking him like vultures. "Detective Hale," one said. "We'd like a word about your conduct regarding the Evelyn Carter investigation." Marcus's pulse quickened. He forced calm. "I'm off that case. By order from the top." The IA officer smiled thinly. That's what we're here to discuss. They took him upstairs, into a windowless interview room. For 3 hours, they grilled him. Why he was still in contact with Carla Monroe after reassignment. Why he visited Derek Lawson hours before his suicide. Why his gun discharged in a public garage without authorization. Every question was framed like he was the suspect. When he finally walked out, drained, Carla was waiting in the car outside. "They're coming for us," Marcus said flatly. Carla's hands tightened on the wheel. "No. They're coming for you. Divide and conquer." Classic Kessler. That night, Carla worked a lead of her own. A bar on the east side, where an ex-accountant for one of Kessler's firms had been drinking himself toward oblivion for years. The man, gaunt and jittery, flinched when she slid into the booth across from him. "I don't want trouble," he whispered. "Neither do I," Carla replied. She set down a photo of Evelyn Carter. She didn't want trouble either. But she ended up dead because she got in Kessler's way. "Tell me what you know, and maybe you won't share her fate." The man's hands trembled around his glass. "You don't get it. Kessler doesn't just fire people. He erases them. Families, too. You think I drink because I like it? I drink because it's the only way I can forget he's still out there watching me." Carla leaned closer. "Then help me stop him." He glanced around, sweat on his temple. Then, slowly, he pulled a folded ledger from his jacket. Pages of handwritten numbers, dates, initials. "Follow the money," he said. "But don't ever call me again." Back at the motel, Carla handed Marcus the ledger. He flipped through it, the numbers jumping out like hidden code. Offshore deposits, time transfers, shell accounts in Belize, Cyprus, Hong Kong. This is it," Marcus breathed. "This is the artery. Cut it, and he bleeds." Carla nodded grimly. "But we'll need protection. Witnesses, too. And right now, the department is the last place we can go." Marcus stared at her across the mess of papers, rain drumming overhead. "Kessler's tightening the net. IA, the precinct, his killers in the shadows. If we don't move first, he'll choke us out." Carla's voice was low, steady. "Then we move. Tonight." But as Marcus closed the ledger, his phone buzzed again. Another anonymous text. This time, just 3 words. "She is next, ****. Marcus's blood ran cold. The message came with a photo, Carla, taken hours earlier, sitting in that East Side bar. Unaware. He looked at her, then back at the screen. The net wasn't just tightening. It was already around their throats. Marcus Hale had always believed betrayal came with warning signs. A hesitation. A glance held too long. A shift in tone. But when it finally arrived, it was silent. Swift. The night began with hope. The ledger from Kessler's accountant lay open on the motel table, its pages a roadmap to financial rot. Carla was already working names, tracing initials to subsidiaries. But Marcus knew they couldn't hold this alone forever. They needed an ally. Someone inside. "Tom Vargas," Marcus said finally. Carla looked up. "Your old partner?" "He's clean," Marcus insisted. "We worked together 5 years on homicide. If there's anyone I can trust in that building, it's him." Carla hesitated. "Or it's the one Kessler's banking on you trusting." Marcus shook his head. "No. Tom's solid." At 2 a.m., Marcus met Vargas in an underground parking lot near the river. The rain echoed through concrete pillars, distant and hollow. Vargas stepped out of the shadows, heavier than Marcus remembered, but the same easy grin. "Marcus Hale, off the grid," Vargas said. "You always did know how to make a mess." Marcus handed him a copy of the ledger. "This isn't a mess. It's Kessler. Laundering through charities, erasing anyone who gets too close. I need someone inside to keep this safe. Someone who won't fold." Vargas flipped through the pages, whistling low. Christ. This is dynamite. Yeah, Marcus said. That's why I came to you. Vargas looked up. His smile didn't reach his eyes. You did the right thing, Hale. Then headlights cut through the garage. Black SUVs rolled in, doors opening in perfect synchronization. Marcus's stomach turned cold. Tom, what did you do? Vargas's voice was soft, almost apologetic. I have a family. You think I'm gonna take on Richard Kessler with a pension and a mortgage? I'm sorry, brother. I really am. Gunmen poured from the SUVs, weapons drawn. Marcus dove behind a pillar, bullets sparking concrete. He returned fire, forcing 2 men back. Then another voice cut through the chaos. Calm. Precise. Enough. Daniel Troy stepped forward, unarmed, his coat soaked with rain. The gunmen lowered their weapons at his gesture. Marcus, chest heaving, aimed his pistol squarely at Troy. Do it. Finish the job. Troy shook his head slowly. If I wanted you dead, detective, you wouldn't have made it this far. Then what do you want? Marcus spat. For the first time, Troy hesitated. His eyes flicked toward Vargas, then back to Marcus. What I want, Troy said quietly, is not always what Kessler pays me to do. The words hung in the cold air. Vargas shifted uneasily. This isn't part of the deal, Troy. But Troy cut him off with a look. You talk too much. Then, without warning, Troy slammed Vargas against the SUV, disarming him with surgical precision. The ex-partner crumpled, groaning, as Troy's men closed in. Go, Troy said, turning back to Marcus. Take your evidence and go. This is the only chance you'll get. Marcus didn't move, gun still trained on him. Why? Troy's jaw tightened. Because not everyone deserves to vanish just because Kessler decides they should. Minutes later, Marcus was back behind the wheel of Carla's car, tires screaming on wet asphalt. Vargas was gone, dragged into one of the SUVs. The ledger was still clutched in Marcus's hand, his knuckles white. Carla looked at him, stunned. You're telling me Troy saved your life? Marcus stared ahead at the rain-slick streets. He's playing his own game. I just don't know which side he's on. Back in the parking lot, Vargas knelt on the concrete, a gun barrel pressed against the base of his skull. Troy stood over him, unreadable. You sold him out, Troy said quietly. And still you think Kessler will protect you? Vargas whimpered. Please. I did what I had to. The shot echoed once, then silence. Troy holstered the weapon, eyes lifting toward the storm above. For the first time, he wondered how much longer he could keep pretending he was just following orders. The city felt like a trap. Every corner shadowed, every alley a dead end. Marcus Hale knew there was no more running. Not after the garage. Not after Vargas. The ledger was heavy in his pocket, not in weight, but in consequence. Enough to ruin Richard Kessler. Enough to paint a target on both their backs until the job was done. They made their move at dawn. Carla had traced one of the shell corporations to a high-rise downtown, an office suite that looked sterile and empty by day. But the money flowing through it was toxic, poisoning half the city's institutions. This is where he launders it, Carla whispered as they parked across the street. We take the hard drives, we get the signatures, we don't just have smoke, we've got fire. Marcus nodded. Then we burn him with it. Inside, the suite was immaculate. White walls, chrome fixtures, the faint hum of servers behind frosted glass. Too clean. Too quiet. Marcus was halfway to the server room when he saw it. A red dot dancing across Carla's chest. Down, he shouted, shoving her behind a desk. The glass shattered as suppressed rounds tore through the office. Figures in tactical black swarmed from both ends of the hall. Kessler's men. The trap had already been set. They fought their way deeper into the building, Marcus's pistol barking in short, desperate bursts. Carla dragged a duffel of stolen hard drives, ducking behind cubicles as bullets chewed the furniture. But just when the numbers seemed overwhelming, a voice cut through the chaos. "Stand down." The gunfire ceased. From the smoke at the far end of the corridor, Daniel Troy emerged, flanked by two of his men. His eyes locked on Marcus, then shifted to Carla. "You should have stayed buried," Troy said. Marcus aimed his pistol at him. "Then pull the trigger. End it." But Troy didn't move. His gaze dropped to the hard drives Carla clutched, then back to Marcus. "You think evidence will stop Kessler?" Troy said. "He built this city's shadows. He owns the courts, the cops, the press. You hand that over, and it vanishes before sunrise." Carla's voice was sharp. "So what, we do nothing? Let him erase more people like Evelyn?" For a moment, something flickered in Troy's expression. Regret. Doubt. Then, with sudden precision, he raised his hand, not at Marcus, but at his own men. "Lower your weapons." The mercenaries hesitated. Confused. Troy's voice hardened. "Now." They obeyed. The silence was louder than gunfire. Later, on the rooftop, rain streaked across steel and glass. Marcus and Carla faced Troy in the open, the city skyline behind him. "This doesn't make us allies," Marcus said coldly. "You've killed too many." Troy nodded once. "I know what I am. But Kessler is worse. If you want him, you'll need more than paper trails. You'll need someone who knows how he breathes." Carla narrowed her eyes. "And that someone is you?" Troy's gaze drifted to the horizon, as if the city itself weighed on him. "I've served him too long. I know the safe houses. The handlers. The one place he goes when the walls close in." Marcus studied him, torn between rage and necessity. "Why now?" Troy met his eyes. For once, there was no mask. "Because I'm tired of being the hand that erases people who never deserved to disappear." Far across the city, Richard Kessler stood in his penthouse, watching the storm roll over Portland. His phone buzzed with a secure line. "He's switched sides," the voice reported. Kessler's jaw tightened, but his smile was thin, controlled. "Then it's simple," he said. "If Daniel Troy won't bury them, we bury him with them." For Marcus and Carla, the hunt had begun. But for Kessler, it was no longer a hunt. It was war. The storm had broken by nightfall, leaving the city slick and gleaming under fractured neon. Marcus Hale stood at the edge of the old shipyard, pistol heavy at his side. Carla checked the recorder in her jacket pocket for the 100th time. This was it, the final card. A meeting leaked through one of Troy's contacts. Kessler, cornered, forcing his inner circle into a last gathering before he disappeared overseas. "If we walk in," Carla whispered, "there's no walking out." Marcus's voice was low, steady. "Then we don't walk out empty." Inside the warehouse, Richard Kessler sat like a king in exile. A ring of armed men surrounded him, but his eyes burned brighter than the storm outside. "Well," he said, smiling as Marcus and Carla were shoved into the circle. "The detective who forgot how to die quietly. And the girl who thinks a ledger can save her city." Carla shot back, "It's not just a ledger anymore. We have recordings, statements, transfers. Your empire isn't shadowproof anymore." Kessler chuckled, shaking his head. "You still don't understand. I don't need shadows. I am the light people are too afraid to stare into." A shot rang out. One of Kessler's guards dropped before anyone saw the angle. Daniel Troy stepped into the open, rifle leveled, eyes locked on Kessler. "You're done," Troy said flatly. For the first time, Kessler's smile cracked. "Daniel. After everything I gave you. You think you're better than me?" Troy's jaw clenched. "No. I think I'm finished being yours." Chaos erupted. Gunfire thundered through the steel rafters, sparks raining down. Marcus dove for cover, returning fire as Carla scrambled to drag evidence toward a side exit. Troy moved like a phantom, cutting down Kessler's guards with brutal precision, but every shot drew blood closer to him. When the smoke cleared, only 3 men remained standing. Marcus, his pistol raised. Troy, bleeding from his shoulder, rifle trembling in his hands. And Kessler, backing toward a steel door, desperation in his eyes. Marcus advanced, gun steady. "It's over, Kessler. You killed Evelyn Cole. You staged a locked-room murder to look like despair, but it was you. She found the cracks in your empire. And you silenced her." Kessler sneered. "She was nothing. One voice in the dark. No one remembers her but you." Carla's voice cut sharp from behind, "And us. And now the whole city will." Kessler lunged for his pistol. The warehouse lit with a final flash. When the echoes died, Richard Kessler lay sprawled on the concrete, blood spreading like ink. Marcus lowered his smoking gun. Troy leaned against a pillar, pale, breath ragged. Marcus turned toward him, torn. "You saved us," Marcus said quietly. Troy shook his head. "No. I just couldn't erase another name." He pressed something into Marcus's hand, a small drive, slick with blood. The rest of his empire. Offshore accounts. Shells. Destroy it all. Marcus gripped the drive. "Come with us. You can testify." Troy's eyes softened with something like regret. "Men like me don't get trials. We get ghosts." He sank to the floor, the weight of years finally dragging him under. His last breath left like a whisper. By dawn, the police swarmed the shipyard. The evidence Carla carried shook the city awake. Names. Accounts. Kessler's empire crumbled under the weight of truth at last. Marcus watched from the docks as the sun broke through storm clouds, painting the water in fractured gold. "Locked apartment," Carla said softly, standing beside him. "It was never about the door, was it?" Marcus nodded slowly. "No. It was about the walls we let men like Kessler build around us. And the locks we pretended couldn't be broken." Carla looked at him. "And now?" Marcus's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Now we break them all." The city breathed again. But the shadows never truly vanished.